morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Carruthers, and I am the Events Manager here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to IT Basics for Business, a breakfast seminar series that provides a forum to gain useful do-it-yourself IT solutions and insightful, actionable tips. I want to begin by thanking Uprise Partners for continuing their support, allowing us to bring you this virtual event series yet again this season. This morning's event is the first installment of IT Basics for Business for the 2024-25 event season. So welcome, everyone. This four-part bi-monthly series runs from October through June. Today's topic, Getting the Most from Microsoft, Tips for Teams and SharePoint, is presented by Kyle Peterson, Senior Director of Services at Uprise Partners. Uprise Partners is our presenting sponsor of IT Basics for Business for this entire season. At this time, I'd like to introduce Uprise Partners CEO, Melinda Gagnon, to the floor to tell us a bit more about the work that Uprise Partners does.
Thanks so much, Rachel. We really appreciate being here and sponsoring another series with you all. I want to take a brief moment to introduce Uprise Partners. We are an IT services company, and this year we were really excited to be honored as being recognized for our fast growth. We were recognized as the second fastest growing IT and cybersecurity provider in the US out of 35,000 of our peers. And we're headquartered right here in Maine. We serve many customers here in Maine, throughout the Northeast, as well as across the country and the globe. Our mission is to help build businesses. And we all know that no matter what business you're in, we need technology to succeed. We focus exclusively on small, medium-sized businesses. We find that they're the organizations that are making the biggest impact, and they're certainly the organizations that are contributing to the greatest number of job creation and growth in our country. So we're really excited to dig in with these tremendous organizations that we get to support. This year, not only we were recognized as being a fast-growing company, we were also for the first time named to the Tech Elite 250 list by CRN. We also have won for the fourth year in a row a nod as one of the top 100 security firms in North America and among the top 500 managed service providers in North America. So we have a wonderful team. We really enjoy what we do. Hope you enjoy the series this year and the one that's ahead of us on Teams and SharePoint. So please reach out if you have any questions. We'd love to talk with you. You can find us at uprisepartners.com.
Thank you, Melinda. You know, we've always appreciated working with Uprise Partners, but it's just wonderful to watch you grow as a company and then see you getting recognized for the work that you're doing. So thank you. Like all the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free and will be recorded and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com. Check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Before we begin today's program, I just want to remind everyone that we are using a platform called StreamYard this morning. This platform provides improved production and interactive elements that truly enhance virtual events. On that note, I'd like to point out that when you have questions for Kyle this morning, you can type them in the YouTube chat. I will relay them to our speaker at the conclusion of the presentation, where we'll also save some time for a Q&A session. Now, a bit more about this morning's presenter. Kyle Peterson is the Senior Director of Services at Uprise Partners, where he's responsible for new customer experience and services operations. He works with customers on Chief Information Officer advisory and has optimized IT environments for hundreds of customers. Kyle specializes in email security, security compliance, and disaster recovery. We're very grateful to have him with us this morning. With that, I will hand the mic over to Kyle to kick things off.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate it. And as always, really happy to work with the Chamber. Absolutely love doing these and helping as many businesses as we can with really learning more about your technology. So today, as many of you know, right, we're going to focus on Teams, SharePoint, and really just how can you get the most out of Microsoft? Um, that is a really broad term, right? Microsoft has a ton of tools inside of it, but you're going to hear me talk about these two specifically because I think for a lot of businesses, maybe you're using most of it, but there's a lot of improvement that could be had, a lot of efficiencies there. Honestly, with not a lot of effort to get them stood up, and some of it is really just a change of habit and how you're using the tool. So you're going to see a mix of, maybe a little bit more in the technology and how it works, and then a little bit about, hey, here's how you might want to structure things from like a logical sense inside of these platforms. So we will get started. So again, a little bit about what we'll cover: streamlining communication and collaboration in Microsoft Teams. That is a big one. Again, you're going to hear me say the words Teams and SharePoint quite a bit throughout this. Um, Next, we're going to talk about organizing and managing the documents efficiently in SharePoint. We've got some examples of this, but again, I do want to say too, with all of these, um, it's going to be unique to your organization. So I can give you these guidelines, I can kind of talk through these, but it's not necessarily a one size fits all. But this should get you off on the right track of where you should start looking. Also, integrating Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, all of those tools are built to kind of plug into each other. So it should be really seamless, integrating however you want with those tools. Then we'll go into some advanced features and sort of like hidden tips, maybe things that are right in front of you that you're not seeing, maybe a little bit more of advanced features that we can talk through. And then, it'd be wrong to have one of these without talking about security, but just talking a little bit about security and compliance as you go through this whole process yourselves. What are some things you should consider? This is, again, both from a strategy and from a mindset perspective, but also what does Microsoft give you in all of these tools to be compliant, to look at security, be secure as an organization. So we'll spend some time on that. All right. So Microsoft Teams. This is a big one, especially post COVID. There was a big migration to Microsoft Teams. If you don't know what Teams is, um, I would say it's similar to something like Slack. Um, I think it has more functions. Again, it is way more plugged into Microsoft. So if you're already using the Microsoft suite of tools, this is great. But additionally, even if you're not, if you're working on Google, they still play nice together. There's still a lot of integrations to be had there. So Microsoft Teams, what is it? How can you use it? Right. So Teams allows you to have real-time collaboration. So think co-editing documents in real time. There was a period where that was only Google that really let you do that consistently and with ease, right? It was kind of a pain in the butt. With Microsoft, or for some people, it doesn't exist or didn't exist, but now you can. So you and your teammates, we'll talk about versioning a little bit more, but you don't have to worry about emailing back and forth 100 times. Here's this document, version 1, version 2, version 3, right? And then you get all confused because you're emailing versions over at the same time. um, Immediately eliminates that with Teams. Something else to note as well: Teams and SharePoint, as I said, are very integrated, but think of them as almost the same tool in some ways. A lot of what happens in Teams is replicated to SharePoint, and vice versa in some ways. So you'll see a lot of overlap as we talk about both of these, and that's intentional to show you how well you can use both of these tools together. They really, our team uses it, and it really is seamless once you get into both of them. um, Similar to something like a Slack or any other messaging tool, it's instant messaging with your teammates. So if you just need to shoot someone a quick message, ask a quick question, you do have that functionality in Teams. And then file sharing, that is a big one. So because SharePoint is sort of the back end or behind the scenes of Microsoft Teams, it makes it really easy to share files, either by uploading the file itself, sharing a link inside of Teams, So that is going to be really good for real-time collaboration. Um, like I said, chats, meetings, and channels. So it allows for organized communications. So when you're thinking of how to set up your channels, right, you want to make sure that the channels are set up to discuss a specific topic, right? So you'll have your general channels or maybe like a random channel where you post funny things, right? But as you're creating your channels, as you're creating your teams, you want to make sure that they're focused on a specific topic. So when you go in there and your teammates go in there, you know roughly what you're going to find inside of that channel. Schedule and join meetings directly from Teams. So for those not aware, this, again, just comparing it to another tool, it has functionality similar to Zoom. So something that we honestly see a lot of is a Slack and Zoom combination for an organization, when in reality, you could just use Teams and it eliminates both of those tools. And it's included in, I would say, maybe 90% of Microsoft plans. Included in most. So you can go from not only two tools but two bills into one platform. So something that's just included with a license that you need anyways. So it's really nice that that's just built right into Teams. And then you have chat history. So if you ever have to go back to look at a conversation, if you need to reference something, you have a full chat history that you can reference. And then lastly, with Teams, you have your integrations and customizations. So there are tons of app integrations, both outside of the Microsoft suite of tools, but also inside of it. So things like Microsoft Planner, OneNote, all can integrate into Teams. So you kind of have one view of all of your tools that you're using. And then with that comes automation. So a tool called Power Automate is very, very useful. It can be used in a very basic sense. It can be used much, much more advanced, right? But you can really automate those repetitive tasks just by integrating it into Teams. And again, it's all built in. You don't have to set something up custom. It's just built right in, and then you can use it. And then lastly, custom notifications inside of that. So that is just, did somebody tag you in something? Did somebody tag a channel to notify everyone? You can customize how those notifications come through to you to make sure your notifications aren't blowing up and you're only getting the things that you need. Right. So as I mentioned, some of this is about sort of a logical sense and sort of how are you going to set this up um, for your organization. Again, going to be different for most people, but just as a general idea, I wanted to pull up this example where you can see the breakdown of, again, just a basic setup where you have your whole organization. Then you may have three teams, right? You may have a development team, a sales team, and a marketing team. So from there, you create those teams, and then inside of that, you would have each of your channels. So these could be anything. These could be general. These could be product releases. It could be anything like that. And then within that, it's a little hard to see here, but you have all of your communication happening in there, any files related to that channel's topic in there, planner integrations, anything like that, all into its individual channel. So again, going back to the last slide, everyone knows when I go into this channel, here's the general discussion. Here are the things I'm looking to find in there. So really make it department based or project based, right? So you could spin up a team for one project and then spin it back down once that project's done. Something else to consider is private versus public teams. So just as it says here, private teams are invite only. So use that for sensitive information. Think something like an HR department would most likely want to make that team private. So it's invite only. Not anyone can just find it and join. And then public teams are going to be, honestly, again, like 95% of your teams are probably going to be public, where the team can join it, interact, and see everything going on. Uh, Another thing is guest access. So this is a really, really important one when we're talking about security. You need to think, are you going to have guests in your environment? That's the first question, right? If the answer is yes, you do need to consider how those guests are going to access the content and what content do they actually need. It's very easy to just say, I don't want to have to go through all these permissions and everything. I'll just throw them in the channel. But I would encourage you to really look at what guests have access to in each channel. And then you can build your workflows, build your channels, everything based around that. And then a big one is naming conventions. So make these clear, concise, and consistent. Uh, the best thing you can do is do those things, and then no one has to guess. Especially as you get new people onto the team, it's really easy to forget for someone who's been there for 5, 6 years. Of course, they know where everything goes. They know what all the channels do. But for someone new, or maybe any contractors or guests you have, it's going to be honestly a waste of time to have them trying to guess what each channel is for. So something like if you have project codes or certain things like that you can tie to those channels that make it clear what it is. Department names are really good. They'll know exactly where to go based on that. And then want to talk a little bit about best practices for teams. So again, a little bit of a recap of what we just talked through, but map out your organization structures. Um, Identify if there are certain teams that need different permissions. So this could even be within a specific team or channel. Maybe different people need different permissions. Create a few drafts and versions of what this could look like. um, you don't need to get it right on the first try. You don't need to do it in the live environment. You can do it as a test. You can honestly take a piece of paper and just write it down what you want it to look like, and crumple it up and throw it out and try again. So really do that first, right? You want to get it right first and then go to implement it. We've seen a lot of times where people will implement it, keep going along, and then they realize, oh shoot, we didn't really set ourselves up to scale or to grow, or if we pivot at all, we're kind of locked into how we have this thing set up, and it's going to take a lot to switch off of that. So definitely map out how you want it, how your organization structure looks, and how permissions and groups should look, and you'll set yourself up really well. Create teams with privileged information. Avoid private channels where you can. So that is a really important one. Again, locking down that privilege information, locking down guest access with the private channels, public channels. You want to keep that in mind when you're going through those drafts that we talked about. And then, like I said, be clear with the channel definitions and the titles. And simple is better. Absolutely is better. Uh, we talk about it a little later, but you don't want to have, you know, 30 folders all nested underneath each other and someone's trying to find it, or all these channels that could be very, very broad and you don't even know what they're for. Keep it simple. You can always build off of it in the future. And then with this, and especially if you have a remote workforce, you want to simulate being in an office with really effective shared communication. So you want to have organized discussions using Teams, channel organization, right? We've talked a lot about this. Document linking. Again, your channel should be focused on a specific subject, or even your team on a specific subject. And from there, you want to keep it organized as to what you're talking about. Notifications we talked about as well. That again, definitely recommend that you customize those. And then the biggest one by far that has even helped our team and something that we do at Uprise is use the public channels. So train the team to keep conversations open. Um, you can even turn off private messaging in some ways if you want. Maybe I don't totally recommend that, but you know, with everyone remote, it's really you really lose that sort of water cooler talk, or maybe overhearing something as you walk by an office or a cubicle. So keeping things in a public channel is really, really important to keep that sense of kind of unity, and that you're in an office and that everyone kind of knows. And maybe your instinct is, oh, I'll just private message, Sally over here because she's working on this, or she knows the best practice here. Well, maybe a bunch of other people have the same question as you, and since you're just doing a private message like that, sure, you'll get your question answered, but maybe if you put it in a public channel, everyone will have their question answered, right? And it just helps the team get educated. So definitely public channels are really good. Help your team utilize those versus private messages. So before I move on to SharePoint, are there any questions? All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, we have one here. My company uses Slack for chat. How easy is it to transition to Teams? Yeah, it's a good question. So, short answer is very easy. We've done a lot of these at Uprise, but essentially, they're mapped out the same, right? So, it's really easy to take a Slack chat or channel and just move it right over to Teams one to one. I would recommend if you are considering moving from Slack to Teams, that you use that as an opportunity to go through the exercise we just talked about and sort of restructure how things are set up. But most integrations, not all, but most integrations, third party or otherwise, that work with Slack will also work with Teams. Like I said, the channel and chat function all is the same. You can carry it all over with you. So yeah, really, really easy to transition over from Teams to Slack or Slack to Teams. Uh, and it's really not a long process either, which is really nice. The data is really easy to move over. And then we have another question: what's the difference between a channel and a chat? Yeah, so that's a really good question. So think of a chat like instant messaging. So this could be a couple different ways. It could be a chat that's alongside a meeting. So if you're in a meeting, say this is a meeting right now, we kind of have a chat going on the side here. So this is like a real time instant messaging. You're going back and forth. Where a channel inside of Teams, that's a little bit bigger. It's a little more of a structural thing. So a channel kind of nests under a team. So think of a channel like you may have your marketing team, right? So you're going to talk about everything marketing. And then inside of that, you may have a channel for just general conversation about marketing. But then you may have a channel about future events, where in that channel, you kind of like think of it like a forum or a place to post things where you might write, hey, we have a new event coming up. It's going to be in 2 weeks. We need to start planning for this, right? And then now you have a post in that channel, and then people can kind of comment under that post. So I would say channel, think of it a little more about like posting and then having a discussion inside of that post, where a chat is really just instant messaging. You're just going back and forth. Go back to your AOL days, where you just have that instant messaging. So yeah, a little bit of a difference there. Awesome. It's a really good question. Cool. So moving on to SharePoint, again, there's going to be some overlap with what we talked about with Teams. But utilizing groups, very important. So um, base your access off of groups as opposed to access off of individual users. So what I mean by that is you can assign users to specific roles, to specific groups, and that will allow you to then say, okay, this group has these permissions, instead of saying, okay, here's a permission for this person and this person and this person, right? So you could be a little more fluid in how you're setting up those roles. So definitely recommend access based on groups. And then, like we talked about, syncing with Teams, OneDrive, very, very easy with SharePoint. Um, then again, collaboration across those. We talked about the co-authoring, cross-platform and cross-device syncing is really great. So that allows you to access your files really anywhere. If you want to access them on a tablet, if you want to access them on your laptop or your desktop, SharePoint allows you to do that from both a right on the desktop, or you can even do it from a web browser if you'd like. And then shared storage. So for every Microsoft team that you create, you're creating a SharePoint site in the background, and in that site, it's going to host all of the files. So what you can do is you can view those files in Teams, or you can log right into SharePoint and then you can start looking at the files there, and it's all in a shared location, so anyone can access those files. So collaboration is huge within SharePoint, huge within Teams as well. And then I just mentioned it, but sites, libraries, lists, you can customize your sites. And when we say site, think of logging into SharePoint, and then you have, again, it's a view into that team, into that. What is that site about? What are you trying to talk about when you go there? Is it your HR site where you're expecting it to be quick links to HR files? You wouldn't go in there and expect to see marketing materials, but you can customize those sites however you like. Version controlling as well. That's automatic version controlling too. So that's not like where you have to create 5 different versions of something that all have V1, V2, V3. It is just automatically version controlling where if you have to go back, it's just built right into the file, which is really, really helpful. And then structuring your data. So tools like Planner, Tasks, good way to structure even inventory in some cases if you want to use it that way, or even your projects, right? Creating sites for your projects. It looks like we have another question here too. Is it best to set up a team so that all members can also access all channels? Um, that's going to be depending on how your organization is set up. So I would say for the most part, yes, I think it's good to allow people access to as many channels as possible. But again, if you have something like HR, right, you may need a separate channel within that that is just private, right? So, or marketing, again, everything may be public, but you might need one channel that is private for maybe a section of the group, or operations is a big one, right? That's probably the best example. If you have operations, again, you may have people who are a little more junior that are in there that can see some of the items, but there may be conversations that need to be segmented off. So again, really depends on how your organization is set up, but as open as you can make things, it's great, and try to limit those private channels as much as you can. But yeah, for the most part, it doesn't hurt to have people in all of the channels. One thing I would say is know your team too. If your team is going to get distracted going through all the channels, looking at all the notifications, and it's going to really distract them, I would keep that in mind as well, that maybe they don't need to be a part of everything. Really good question. All right. So now we're going to talk about uh, kind of my last point, last bullet there: sites, libraries, and lists. So we just have a very basic example of kind of what we talked about, where you may have owners of a site collection. And when we say site collection or site, again, kind of think of that like a team, right? But you can have owners of that team that are a bit more uh, managing it, and then you can have members of that team that can view it. Then you may have some visitors or guests with a whole different set of permissions inside of that. And then obviously you have the admins who really oversee the whole channel from a moderation standpoint, approval standpoint. You're going to have those admins in there. So again, keep these very clear and concise in what they're called. So you want to create department-based or project-based sites. You don't want to have these be too broad, or they kind of lose their meaning. People will lose their focus when they're inside of them. Keep permissions as locked down as you can, right? Are you going to need guests in here? Can the guests see everything? Do you want your whole team in there, right? Really, really limit that as best you can, and really make it based on roles. What roles need to see this? What roles don't need to see certain things? And then in addition with external sharing, that could also tie into actually sharing links or files out to people. You can limit what files are pulled from SharePoint and are able to be shared. So you may say, you know, items in this directory can be shared out, no problem. Those can be external facing, but these over here are internal only. You're not allowed to share those. You can only share those within our organization. So you can get very, very granular. I could honestly probably at some point do a whole talk on just SharePoint and how you can configure all of that. That's its own separate thing that we won't go down that rabbit hole right now. And then, like we talked about before, lists for structuring data. So you can create custom lists. Microsoft also provides you with lots of templates. Again, you might not use them. You might prefer to use a custom list, but this is a really, really good way to organize your data and also automate a lot of this. So Power Automate or Power Apps, uh, again, built right into Microsoft, but it allows you to uh, approve. Probably the biggest one I've seen is like create approval workflows. So you could say, I want to take out this document, I want to share it, I want to do something with it. When you try to do that, it's going to create a workflow that then pushes to most likely an owner or maybe a manager role that's going to have to approve whatever changes or whatever action you're trying to take. So automating things like that is great. So you don't have to do it all in Teams, and you can actually make sure your assets are being managed properly. And then naming conventions, folder structure, keep it flat, as we call it. So I mentioned before, you really don't want to have a file structure that is a folder inside of a folder inside of a folder. And now you've clicked through 30 folders and you're finally at the file that you want. Um, recommendation there is really the recommendation is to use something like metadata. So using tagging, look for keywords that people can search for, and then they'll see all the files. But I like folders as well. But I do know tagging is a really really efficient way to find this data. But if you're going to use folders, try to limit it to maybe 3 or 4 folders deep. If you get much further than that, you're going to run into that problem where people are spending a lot of time just trying to figure out which folder something is in. So definitely try to keep that flat file storage. And then managing documents effectively inside of SharePoint. So again, like I said, a lot of overlap between teams and a lot of overlap here. Just structuring your libraries with those folders with that metadata. Keep things simple, right? What SharePoint also allows you to do is to create custom views. So a view for you may not work for your teammate. So it allows you to create it with different column sets, different amount of items on the screen, and really just different information about that SharePoint site. So really want to use those custom views to tailor it towards you, what'll work best for you, and then your teammates can do what works best for them. And version controlling and co-authoring, just like it's in Teams, it's in SharePoint. It automatically tracks your version history. In addition to that, there is the track changes function. So you can make suggestions on a document, and then whoever the manager is or whoever owns that document can go through and approve the changes. So it's a combination of you can go right in, make the changes, or you can track the changes. You can use suggestions to have a little bit more of an approval process inside of there. And then regarding permissions, something I didn't talk about before is setting expiration dates when sharing files. Something else that SharePoint allows you to do. Depends on what the file is. Most of the time, I would say you're okay to just share a file out. But anything with somewhat sensitive information or something that is only relevant in a certain time block, you can set expiration dates on those. So you'll share it with someone. Once that expires, they'll no longer be able to use that link or access that file. So definitely recommend as you get in there, if you haven't looked at it, that you set expiration dates on some of those files. All right. Any questions on SharePoint? All right. Yeah. Will these slides be available after? Yeah, I think we can make some of these available. Yeah. And then Nora, when is it preferable to use SharePoint versus Teams to store a shared document that people are working on together? Um, yeah, so the nice thing about these is that if you save something in Teams, so if you have, again, we'll use the marketing example. If you have a marketing team, what that does is it creates a SharePoint site at that same time called marketing, right? It's a marketing site. So if you save a file in Teams, it will also save to that SharePoint site. When I would say there's a little bit of a difference, if you're collaborating on something with someone and you want to say, hey, can you just take a look at this document really quick? You can grab a link either directly from SharePoint or from the file itself. If you click share and then grab the link, you could just pop that into Teams and then you can collaborate back and forth on it. You could chat in real time and work on it. So if you're doing that, I would recommend just do that through Teams. But if you're looking for a file, like for example, looking for this slides that we're going through, I didn't need to collaborate with anyone on these to access this and look at it. So I just went to the SharePoint site. I went down the documents, I searched for it, and I found this. So I would say if it's something that you're actively collaborating on, put that in Teams. It will sync with SharePoint, so it's not gone. It's not stuck just in Teams. You'll get it in both places. Collaborate, do that. And then when you need to grab it for either a presentation or for your own, you're just working on it yourself, I would look in SharePoint for that because it's a little bit easier to navigate, a little bit easier to find things. But essentially, the channel inside of Teams is going to mirror what the documents look like in SharePoint. So again, no wrong way to do it, but that's typically how I've seen it done. It's a good question. And then we have another one here. Do you recommend storing files in SharePoint instead of OneDrive? Yeah, great question as well. So again, depends on the use case. So yes, I would recommend if it's something that someone else on the team needs to see, save that in SharePoint. It's always better to have it there so the team can look at it. Uh, OneDrive is a little bit more of a personal space. So if it's something you're just working on, if it's something that you're just um, a draft version of something that you're not ready for anyone to see, uh, it's okay to save it in OneDrive. OneDrive also is really, really important for backing up your desktop documents and pictures on your computer. So it is really good for that. So if you save something right on your desktop that you're working on, it'll sync right up to OneDrive. Um, so again, depends on what the file is. I always recommend SharePoint first, but OneDrive is totally fine if it's just a work in progress that you're not ready to share with anyone. Cool. And then another good question. It appears that it's better to download and then format documents versus working on them online. Is this the case? Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the online versions of the Microsoft Suite are lacking in some functionality and tools. Um, some things you can get away with if you're just doing basic editing and you have really nothing complex in there. You could get away with just doing it in the online version. But yeah, I would say for consistency, yeah, that's probably a good thing to say too. If you're looking for consistency, make sure you do the same thing every time. If you download a document, format it a bunch, and then open it in the web version, there's a chance that the formatting is all over the place. So definitely recommend the desktop version of Tools. Download that file, open it in there. So I say download it, but SharePoint actually has the functionality alongside OneDrive where you can open a document from the web. You can click on, I think it'll be edit and then open in desktop application. You can work on it. And then when you save it, it'll just go back up to the cloud. It'll be edited and you'll be good to go. So again, you don't have to download a whole new version, then upload a new version. You can work on it in real time and sort of that live document, even on the desktop application. So I would definitely recommend you're doing that, especially if you're doing something advanced in like Excel or even PowerPoint. Formatting is just going to be a lot more accurate, and you're going to have a lot more tools at your disposal versus the web application. That's a really good question. Awesome. So, really well timed as well. The integrating Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. So uh, with this integration, you have seamless workflows, right? So you can collaborate in Teams while using SharePoint for document storage and management. And you can also use Power Automate, something you've heard me say a lot, right? So you can connect all your workflows between Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. You can do all sorts of things with that Power Automate tool. I would definitely recommend checking that out. And then accessing SharePoint from Teams, we kind of jumped right ahead on that, which is great. But all your permissions sync between the two, all your files sync between the two, and you have direct access to SharePoint through Teams. So they're really one and the same in a lot of different ways. And then syncing files with OneDrive for offline access. So you do need internet connectivity for OneDrive. So something they do have is automatic offline updates. So if you're offline, maybe you're traveling, you don't have internet access, you can make tons of changes to documents that you have saved on your desktop. Once you get connected to the internet, it will instantly start uploading those to OneDrive. So it's not like you have to upload a whole new file. It's not like you have to do anything. Just get connected to the internet and it will start syncing everything. And then you do have selective file and directory syncing. So you can choose what from SharePoint you want to sync to OneDrive and you want to sync to your desktop. So you don't have to be inundated with every single channel, every single team out there syncing to your computer. You can choose only the ones that you want to see. And I mentioned it before, but it works across all devices, all different platforms as well. So there's a lot of ways that those integrate with each other. And then we have another question from Jason. What is the most common 365 license that a small business needs to be able to secure and also use Teams? So the most common, um, let's say, you can get away with business standard for that. That's the most common that we see. The recommendation would be something like business premium. And the reason for that is business premium has a lot of additional security measures in place with it. So it allows you access to more security and it also gives you more functionality from that security perspective. So recommendation is definitely business premium in that respect. That's a good question, but that gives you access to the desktop version of of the applications and also the web version of all the applications as well. Awesome. So a couple, advanced features, kind of hidden tips that we talked about a little bit, and I've hinted at some of them, right? But using those Teams apps and connectors, so integrating with things like Microsoft Forms and Asana, using the app tab. So if you have Teams right now, you'll see that there's an apps tab where you can pull in things like Planner, Forms, tons of different integrations. Power Automate we talked about, and then the SharePoint hub. We'll talk about this a little bit more. I have a couple example slides coming up here. In addition to that, Planner and tasks. So I've mentioned those as well. Your task tracking, so makes collaboration even better that you can just show those right in a Teams channel. So definitely recommend using tools like Planner and working on that together. Gonna have another example of that one, I believe, in here too. And then the lists and forms that we talked about, creating those custom lists. Maybe you're in operations and you need to start managing inventory. Those lists are going to be great for that. I know we're coming up on time a little bit here, so I just want to definitely show you some of these examples because it's a little easier to look at these and kind of see, oh, okay, this is what he's talking about. So looking at the Teams apps and connectors. So right here we have an example of an embedded Microsoft form. You could see it's just, it's a survey, feedback on the new tour. This is just something pulled from Microsoft. But the form has been embedded, so it's just right in the Teams channel. You don't have to go to Microsoft Forms. You don't have to go to another web page. It's just built right into this channel. You could see real-time updates right there. If you look on the right of that screenshot, you could see that people are actually chatting in real time about, you know, how do we update this? What should we do here? Here's the link to it. Hey, this looks good. So you actually have that real time collaboration, uh, chatting and editing simultaneously. So people can actually see the updates you're making as you're talking through it, which is fantastic. And then consolidating the workspace where all of this collaboration happens. Like I said, you don't need a Slack channel where you're talking about it, and then you have Teams over here where you're maybe editing it, or maybe Microsoft Forms is up where you're editing it, and then maybe you're on a Zoom call. You can just do all this in one spot. So it makes things a lot less complicated, which is really what we're looking for here. And then talked a lot about Teams and Power Automate. So using those two, just as some examples of some triggers and actions that you can do. This is not an fully inclusive list, right? It's just an example of some things you can do. So use Teams to trigger automations. So automated workflows based on a certain action. This could be something that happens in Teams. It could be something that happens with a third party integration as well. Enhancing your collaboration through that. So yeah, sending a notification, assigning a task to someone. You can set up all sorts of different notifications through that. And then streamlining those repetitive tasks, right? We want to cut down on repetitive tasks that are all manual all the time. So you can use something like Power Automate to integrate with Teams. And again, you could see some of these examples too, like when a keyword is mentioned, right? You do something off of that, right? Create a chat, create a team when, I'm mentioned or something, right? You could do like all sorts of different things just on this one screenshot, which is just a portion of the functionality inside of Teams. So definitely, if you have access to this, if you're using those, I recommend you go in here, play around with it, right? If you have a test environment, that would be really good to just try it out. And then we have the SharePoint hub site that I've been talking about. So this is a really good example of a few different functions that you can have in a site. So we have this, again, just Microsoft generated HR site. But some of the things that you can see here, right? A centralized news section, news from around your hub. It displays important news, updates, anything from this site and also from any connected sites that you may want. It has an event management section. So, what are some events that are coming up in the organization? Quick links. So, you can actually see that on the right. It's just that little section kind of in the middle right. This could be quick links to certain forms, other SharePoint sites, Teams channels, could be really anything, but you just have a quick link section to bounce around your environment. And then you have the top sites. So these are key SharePoint sites that, if you're in HR, you may need to look around those, or it might be something that you frequently visit. You do have your top sites in there. So again, you can structure this however you want. This is just a really, really good example of a basic HR site. You pop in here and you could see everything that you need to see. Instead of having to just ask a million questions of people, you could start here, see if you can get the answer yourself or get informed as you need to. And then the key security measures here, um, data protection in Teams and SharePoint. So really, really important. Uh, you'll have encryption at rest and in transit. So you want to make sure that anything that's being transmitted across Teams in SharePoint is encrypted. You do have that functionality. Data loss prevention, or DLP for short. Basically, that will help block sensitive information from being transmitted unintentionally. So think credit card numbers, social security numbers, banking information, right? It could be anything like that. It could be more than that, even, but really just helps you limit how much of that is shared out of these platforms. And then information rights management, or IRM. Think of that more around the permissioning side of things. So you can restrict document sharing, printing, copying, anything like that through information rights management, which again, good question by Jason, because a lot of that is included with the business premium Microsoft licensing. So having all of these tools at your disposal, you can really, really secure your environment without putting, too much strain on the team. So I definitely recommend looking into those as well. And then permission management and best practice, right? Use SharePoint groups, really try to put people in the group and then assign permissions based off that. And then regularly review user access. So this could be done quarterly. I wouldn't recommend this like be a weekly or monthly thing, but could be quarterly, could be biannually, and could really be annually, right? If you're not too concerned and you think you've kept it pretty up to date. But it is important to review user access. Make sure that people who are no longer there don't have access to things. Make sure that people who don't need access to something anymore, maybe via role change or something, they don't still have access to those documents. And then compliance with industry regulations. Make sure you have audit logging turned on. It allows you to see if files are deleted, files are moved, changes are made. You want to have audit logging on for a number of different things. Setting up your retention policies. So if you have a requirement, depending on the industry that you're in, that you will keep items for, 7 years, 5 years, however long it is, you can set up retention policies to be different for different types of documents. And then lastly, use the built-in compliance manager. Microsoft has that built into their tools. It helps you with compliance. It tells you what you can use. Maybe even in some cases where you're missing the mark on compliance, that that admin center, that function is really, really important. So just to recap, kind of high level, some of the things that are our top recommendations. Regularly auditing your workflows and communication tools. Similar to what we talked about, adding in that you should regularly audit your permissioning as well in your groups. Creating dedicated teams and channels for specific uses so that people know what they're looking at when they're in a specific channel. Using SharePoint permissions to control access to specifically sensitive documents and how those are shared. And then lastly, make it a part of your communications culture, right? So want to make sure that public channels are used, people are sharing documents, you have version controlling on. Really make this a big part of how you communicate with each other. Awesome. And thank you very much. Do you have any other questions?
We'll just wait just 30 seconds just to see if anyone has any final questions. Let's see. The comment section was very active.
Yeah.
As I sort of expected for this topic.
Yeah, a lot of really, really good questions, and definitely understanding where SharePoint and Teams overlaps is a common question. So yeah, that a lot of really good questions.
It's looking like we don't have any questions, although we have a lot of good response from those who were engaging throughout the presentation. And will reiterate those. Yes, thank you. Great presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Awesome. There's just something, as we transition, right, we transitioned during COVID to, virtual meetings, basically virtual work exclusively. And now we've transitioned back to sort of hybrid work. But all of those tools that we picked up during that time period, I find just streamlines everything that I do. Everything that we do at the Chamber here has been much improved. And the more that we can get, utilize these programs that we have to the fullest extent, from a event planner perspective, I learned quite a bit today. So I will be seeking out those alternative planning methods, to streamline my process, my brain. There's just too much human error involved. So
yeah, that's awesome. Like I said, yeah, try to get away from using 4 different tools to just using one where you could talk to everyone and plan in one space is going to be really helpful, I think.
yes, and creating those timelines and those, those task lists is just so helpful. Many of our members here at the Chamber are small businesses. So I think kind of the assumption is, right, that we're a small business, small number of employees, so we can just all communicate and cover all of our bases easily. But really, I mean, when you're a small team and you're getting a big job done, any way to streamline communication is going to be helpful. We find here at the Chamber that resources such as SharePoint and Teams help us as a small team, help us do big things. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Well, thank you, Kyle, for another great IT Basics for Business presentation from Uprise Partners. And thank you, Melinda, for chiming in at the beginning of the session this morning. It's great to hear from you, and it's great to hear how much Uprise Partners has grown and that people are recognizing you for those accomplishments. So thank you again. And thank you, of course, to my fellow Chamber staff for helping to produce yet another successful virtual event. Last but not least, thank you, each of you, for attending and engaging in the conversation this morning. We hope that you return and visit with us throughout this season. If you're interested in learning more and continuing the conversation with Kyle, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with links to additional resources. Another shout out to our sponsor, Uprise Partners, for their support and contributions to the IT Basics for Business series. We look forward to seeing you again in the new year on January 28th for another informational episode of IT Basics for Business. In the meantime, visit our website, portlandregion.com, subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, as well as follow us on social media, where we post all of our upcoming events and updates in between those events. All right, everyone, thank you again for attending this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day.